Final Fantasy XVI got a bunch of previews from multiple different outlets as Square Enix has started their marketing blitz for Final Fantasy XVI, and the game is looking incredible. I love what they've done so far with the graphics, the voice acting, the presentation. I have a few reservations with the combat, but overall, it's looking really good. The boss battles are huge and energetic and have a life to it that we haven't seen in quite some time for Final Fantasy. I think that the fast-paced action and the Devil May Cry style of combat is going to work well for what they're trying to do on the PlayStation 5 and also from a sales perspective. Now, once again, doesn't mean that the game has to cater completely to me. I'm completely fine with what they're doing overall with the game, and I'm looking forward to playing it myself because despite whatever reservations I have, I still think that it's a compelling looking package overall, even if there are a few things here and there. But from what I've seen with the gameplay so far, from a little bit of the boss battles, from the just normal traversal and how you get around, how you fight, how it actually works in the combat, I think that this is definitely going to be one of the better Final Fantasy games in the modern era. But let's talk about this controversy that's going down, because recently Yoshi P actually discussed a term that's been used quite a bit but has some connotations that not all Japanese developers and even some people would feel that is appropriate. So let's go ahead and get into this. Now, in a recent interview, Yoshi P talked about how he doesn't want Final Fantasy XVI to be called a JRPG. And we're going to go down the rabbit hole just a little bit with this so you guys can understand the context in terms of what he has to say here, because there was a lot of negative opinions and a lot of, I would just say, emotions on this, but you have to understand where this is coming from. You need to understand the history of it and why I'm probably going to stop using the term JRPG and just use RPGs, which I use most of the time when I make my videos, but there's been plenty of times where I use the term JRPG. So let's go ahead and jump into it here and the article. Shout outs to RPG Site for this one. While there's been a lot of Final Fantasy XVI news and impressions recently, one interview in question between Australian YouTuber SkillUp and Final Fantasy XVI's director Naoki Yoshida has been making waves, specifically for his take on the term JRPG and how some developers at Square Enix not only dislike the label, but even consider some instances of its usage discrimination. Following up on a comment that Yoshida had made during a Q&A section of his session about how the action game genre has advanced and become the norm, SkillUp asked if he thought that the JRPG genre hadn't advanced in the same way. By SkillUp's own admission, he hadn't known that he would be stepping on a bit of a landmine with this question. Interpreting for Yoshida, FF14 and FF16 translation lead Koji Fox shared that the development team does not develop games with the thought process that they are JRPGs, just RPGs. They then go to a step further, saying that the term itself is purely a distinction that they feel has been used exclusively by Western media rather than any user or media in Japan. Even worse, the term itself seems to strike a nerve with some members of the development team due to the associations of how the term has been used in the past. Quote, "This is going to depend on who you ask," he specified, but there was a time when this term first appeared 15 years ago, and for us developers, the first time we heard it, it was like a discriminatory term. The suggestion that at the time the term JRPG was used to silo off Japanese RPGs from other RPGs from the West, often to a negative effect. Furthermore, Yoshida and team don't set out to create a game that fits the more narrow definition of a JRPG. They want to make broad RPGs in line with all the rest of the wider genre. Now, SkillUp does note that Yoshida was quick to acknowledge that nowadays the usage of the term has been far more positive, but that also that he feels that there are still a lot of developers in Japan that remember the feeling that the terminology itself was overly restricting and triggers bad feelings for those that were around when the term first was coined. Quote, "We're going to create an RPG, but to be compartmentalized, they felt was discriminatory," Koji Fox notes, interpreting for Yoshida. Naturally, hearing a director from a major developer from Japan making these statements makes one wonder exactly how widespread this thought process is, and gives me some pause about how I may have played into the same stereotype in the past. If even unknowingly, even the official PlayStation website and store buys into the categorization a certain type of RPG as JRPGs. It's definitely food for thought as we await for Final Fantasy XVI's release when it launches on the PlayStation 5 on June 22nd, 2023. So that last part was from the author, and I definitely understand and agree with them there on that in terms of just like how I talked about it, how I played into it as well with my own content. And yes, Sony themselves, which is a Japanese company at its core, at least when it was first conceived, maybe they're not so much Japanese anymore, but Sony also separates the two and also says, here's what we think are JRPGs. You know, Dark Souls or Demon Souls or Elden Ring, no, those aren't JRPGs. That's not it. That's not the style. That's not the traditional JRPG. Here's the JRPG. And they've actually separated it themselves as well. Now, to know why this became a negative term, you kind of have to go back in the day. And really, there was a segment of time probably around the late 2000s to mid 2010s-ish, where the Western media was very aggressive about the term JRPG, and that meaning bad, or Japanese bad games in terms of RPGs. Not as good. The West is catching up. Now remember, this is in the height of the popularity of games like Fallout 3 and also Mass Effect 1, Mass Effect 2, Mass Effect 3, Skyrim. You know, these type of games were coming out and getting incredible scores and scoring higher than a lot of the AAA RPGs that were coming out at the time. You have to remember, Fire Emblem wasn't what it was until Awakening came out. You also have to remember there wasn't Xenoblade like that either. That was just the Wii game, just one of them. So there wasn't a lot to counter, and Final Fantasy was in its worst time period pretty much ever, with Final Fantasy 13, 13-2, and Lightning Returns not getting as high a scores as the Western RPGs that I talked about. Then you top that all off with what Phil Fish had to say at like a panel or a game developer conference, and there was actually a developer that had worked on Final Fantasy 13 there, a Japanese developer, that asked Phil Fish a question about the games and the Western market, Japanese market, and all of that, and basically Phil Fish ripped the Japanese market a new one.
Thank you for excellent movies. And I'm a freelance game programmer, and in this movie, you were inspired from Super Mario and Metroid and Rockman. I am so proud of it, and as a Japanese. And my question is, could you tell me what kind of about recently Japanese? What do you think about the recently Japanese game?
Is it what is about Japanese games that inspired us?
Recent.
Recent
I'm sorry.
They suck. I'm sorry. Like, you guys need to get with the times and make better interfaces and like update your technology. We're totally kicking your ass. Back then, you guys were the king of the world, but your time has passed. I'm so sorry.
Did you look at his face? Look at what you did, Phil.
And for those who don't know Phil Fish, he made that one game Rez. There was the indie game movie that was about him, and then he kind of just disappeared. He had so much controversy and drama. That's a whole nother thing that you guys can research. I think I'll leave a link in the description though if you want to read more about him and what happened to him and who he is. But essentially, like, pretty much people were just in that room and they were laughing and they were like, ah ha ha, and nobody really came to the defense of that developer, and he came all that way to talk to them, and you can see in his eyes a little bit, you can see with his body language that he felt disrespected. And that type of sentiment around that time period, along with other videos and skits, there was a skit on IGN where they're like, yeah, Final Fantasy's trash.
I'm Scott Bromley, and I hate Final Fantasy. None of the characters, except for those fucking little chocobos, have continued throughout the entire series. F that. Turn-based battle. I don't know if anyone in Japan has been in a fight before, but if you're gonna fight a giant scorpion with metal blades for hands that shoots laser beams out of his butt, you're telling me that thing is gonna sit around and wait for you to figure out if you want to throw a magic spell at it?
I'm about Western games, Western RPGs, Western titles, you know, so there was that going around in the market, and there were times that the media would use that as a negative thing. Now, to kind of back that up a little bit too, back in 2015, right before Xenoblade Chronicles X launched, the developers of Xenoblade Chronicles X, Monolith Soft, was asked about that term. Now, Takahashi, who is the big dog there, he had no problem with it, but multiple other developers from Monolith Soft did not like the term and felt very much the same way that Square Enix developers are feeling as well. And I'm guessing there are a number of other developers that also feel the same way about the term and trying to pigeonhole them in one way or another, because this doesn't happen with any other genre in the industry. When you say JRPG, RPG, it doesn't happen with platformers. You don't say Japanese platformers compared to regular platformers. You don't say that with racing games, with Gran Turismo versus Forza. You don't say that with anything else, but it's said here, specifically with this, you know? So I think that that is the main problem there. Now, if it was widespread across the industry, maybe it wouldn't be such a thing, but the fact that it's just Japanese RPGs and it's been used in a negative way multiple times before, and clearly these Japanese developers have feelings on that, I think it might be time, at least for me, where I'm going to stop using that and just kind of say RPGs, which I've done multiple times. Now, I do say JRPGs quite a bit because I do like that style in terms of, you know, what it is, and I don't have a problem with other people that want to use it. If you want to, that's fine. I don't care really, but I think at the end of the day, I've used the term RPG and had Western RPGs and had Japanese RPGs, or whatever the case is, kind of all in between in there whenever I make my lists or my top RPG lists or whatever the case is. So to me, I think that just using the term RPGs is fine. And then of course you can find out more about the game and the style and everything. But at the end of the day, I guess RPG is an RPG, and that's how these guys want things to be classified. Now, Yoshi P was kind of getting a beat down about this on Twitter because people did not understand the context or read the full thing. They just saw the headlines and kind of went from there. But I do feel that he has grounds to be upset on that, and I can't sit here and disrespect the man over what he feels, and I'm gonna do my best to kind of just do the right thing, I guess, in this situation, because people do feel offended by that term. And I think that really you can still use it if you want to separate or whatever the case is, if you feel that's going to help you make the best purchases or not. Once again, I have no issue with that. I'm empathetic towards what they're saying, and I understand where they're coming from, especially because I was there around that time and I saw a lot of that negativity that term did bring about to developers out there. So it is what it is on that front. But we do have some more RPG content to cover in this video. I want to talk about a new RPG announced called CRYMACHINA for the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, PC, and also the Nintendo Switch. It's coming out this July and it looks very interesting. So CRYMACHINA will first launch for the PS4, PS5, and Nintendo Switch on July 6th in Japan, followed by a worldwide release this fall with an added PC version coming to Steam as well. This is from Furyu and NIS America. Now, this is a single-player action RPG, which was first teased recently from the developers, and now we have that confirmation with the PC release. Now, in Japan, there's all sorts of standard and special editions, digital editions. You guys can check that out on Gematsu. But I wanted to detail a little bit more about this game because it looks pretty cool. Now, this is a world where humans went extinct thousands of years ago, and these synthetic beings known as Die Ex Machina have been tasked to bring back the mankind. Now, 3 of these EVEs have the recreated psyches of deceased humans instilled in their synthetic bodies, and as they seek out their full-fledged humanity, they explore Eden to discover the secrets hidden within. Very interesting premise, and something that I guess maybe could happen one of these days in the distant future. Now, a flashy, action-packed combat paired with in-depth weapon customization creates a stunning RPG experience. Dark scenery and striking science fiction visuals bring the world of CRYMACHINA to life. Now, the key features, hashtag classy, destroy larger-than-life foes with flashy, action-packed RPG combat that flows seamlessly between exploration, hashtag stylish. Eye-catching visuals are supported with alluring sci-fi artwork from really great artists, bringing the bleak, dark world of CRYMACHINA to life, and hashtag strong. This emotional story dives deep into the qualities of humans and pushes players to question their perception of humanity. Love those games that make you think deeply about those type of topics. And there's a bunch of other information on the designers and the development and the scenario production and all of that. Once again, that is on Gematsu, and this game is looking pretty cool. I like the style of it. It's super like hardcore sci-fi futurish, definitely right up my alley, and it looks like it's going to be a solid AA type of RPG for fans to go out there, pick up, and play. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. But speaking of another RPG that I'm looking forward to, we've got some updated information on Trinity Trigger. And yes, I did cover this game recently, and I talked about for a little bit why the May 16th release date is not a good idea, considering it's a few days after The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom's May 12th release date. Well, that's only half right, because the game is coming out May 16th only in Europe. In North America, the game's actually coming out April 25th, so that will be before, a few weeks before The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which is a very good idea. I mean, I would have liked for them to put the whole release before it, but Trinity Trigger is one of those smaller end AA style of action RPGs, and for those who don't know, this game is like a throwback. It's like an old school homage to like Secret of Mana and like those isometric type of action RPGs out there. I'm a huge fan of this style, and from what I've seen from the Japanese gameplay, it looks good. Plus, there is a great cast of developers that have worked on some RPGs that you might have heard of, like Secret of Mana, like Xenoblade, like Octopath Traveler. I mean, there is a lot of stuff here, and even in the About, they talk about how it's combining the look and feel of iconic RPGs from the 90s with the emphasis on fast-paced, customizable combat, and looks like it's definitely delivered that based off of the gameplay that I've seen coming out from Japan. So I'm looking forward to the game. I think it's going to be solid. They have the prices too. There's a day one edition for $59.99, and there's also a digital edition for $49.99. So you do get it a bit cheaper if you want it at launch digitally over physical. What are your thoughts on everything here, guys? And please make sure you check out my most recent RPG news videos, guys. We got a lot of cool stuff if you missed it, talking about Fire Emblem sales, in addition to more information on a potential Castlevania game coming to Nintendo Switch or being announced. So thank you guys so much for watching. I do appreciate it, and we'll see you for the next video. Peace out.